Episode 370, Hunting Crops. Hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we look into the details of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
And Bert, how are you cropped these days?
Oh, I'm shorn very shortly, I'm sure.
Oh, shorn shortly, sure. Surely
Yep.
You're not serious.
Don't call me Shirley.
Oh, we had to get that in there. Well, in as much as our last episode involved Sherlock Holmes drawing the hunting crop on James Windibank as he fled from Baker Street, we thought it might be instructive to look at this tool/weapon in as many episodes as we've looked at weapons and even hunting and shooting. We have not specifically discussed the hunting crop. So this is that time. If you'd like the show notes for this episode, they're available at SherlockHolmesPodcast.com and on whatever podcast app you happen to be listening to us on. Our Patreon supporters, you are in luck because this is the episode when we do a giveaway. Every month, just for our Patreon supporters, we do a random drawing and we give away a back issue of the Baker Street Journal, something that everyone should be reading, either in past or present form. So stay tuned at the end of the episode. We will have that drawing. In addition, you can support us on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/trifles or just click the link in our show notes. For as little as $1 a month, you can become a supporter. We give you additional content, whether it's outtakes or extra conversation, perhaps additional things to look at. That's all available to our paying subscribers. We also have started airing the show via Substack, so this applies to our Substack subscribers as well as our Patreon subscribers. Pick the platform that works for you and have at it. All right, well, we promised a look at hunting crops. As long as we're coming fresh off of the case of identity discussion from the last episode, Bert, give us a description as to how the hunting crop reared its head in that particular story and why it was of the essence.
Well, this really popped out and made us think a little bit about this interesting object in the context of Victorian times. This is in the case of identity, as you point out, and it is the moment where the perfidy of Windibank, James Windibank, has become clear to Sherlock Holmes, and his nefarious scheme has been revealed. And Holmes says, I should give you. There was never a man who deserved punishment more. Where's my hunting crop? Of course, and Windibank skedaddles. And so we asked ourselves, that is interesting how, you reach for this particular object, an object that can be outside of its sporting and hunting uses. There, in the context of a sitting room in the hand of someone, it becomes a formidable and menacing weapon. And there are several instances in the cases of Sherlock Holmes where the hunting crop pops up, and that's sort of what put it up in the front of our minds for today.
Yeah, and we should mention, by way of reference to some other Trifles episodes here, we did an episode on walking sticks and canes. That was episode 215. And we did an episode on hunting and shooting. And I think that was when we looked at sports in the Canon, if I'm not mistaken. What season was our sports season? Season 3, maybe? Was it that far back? Goodness. Yes, sports and games. Episode 145. We looked at shooting and hunting. So the hunting crop would have been something that was typically used in the country, unless you're going on some sort of city hunt. Can't imagine that. But we know that at least in The Hound of the Baskervilles, remember that opening scene in The Hound of the Baskervilles where James Mortimer, MRCS, has left behind his Penang lawyer, very heavy walking stick. And there was an inscription on it, a silver-plated inscription to James Mortimer, MRCS, from your friends at the CCH. And Watson said, oh, the something or other hunt. Because he assumed he must have been part of some hunting club, which, given a reference of someone who was living in the country, who had a heavy stick like that, that would have made sense. But Holmes very acutely reasoned that a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons was more likely to be part of a hospital than a hunt in the city. So that's one of the things that when we think about hunting clubs always comes up in my thinking.
Yeah, poor Watson, really wasn't on point there because, first of all, if it was a hunt, he would have probably been given a riding crop.
There you go.
A walking stick. But also, with all of that care devoted to pulling out his professional designation, it is kind of suggestive, let's say, that it would be a present from people who are similarly professionally engaged with the particular individual.
That's right. And Watson, as a medical man, should have known that.
Yeah, man, maybe.
Charing
he was
Cross
having an
Hospital.
off day.
Yeah,
Watson.
he was having an off book.
An off book. But then later in The Hound of the Baskervilles, we do see a hunting crop pop up, and that is to guard one of the principals against, some sort of danger.
Well, that's exactly right. This was, I think, when Sir Henry and Watson had spotted the light out on the moor. The light still burned steadily in front, Watson said. And he said, "Are you armed?" And Sir Henry said, "I have a hunting crop." And there it was. So that was as they went out on the chase after this fellow who happened to be Selden, the Notting Hill murderer. There Sir Henry was with his hunting crop. Now, I suppose this is the appropriate time to stop and ask ourselves, if for modern listeners, what is a hunting crop anyway?
Well, it's usually you don't like to talk, particularly today, very much about inflicting harm on animals, but basically to urge your steed on to faster performance, you would employ a hunting crop, which is generally a short leather whip. If you want to think about a walking stick as a solid piece of wood that's, say, 32 to 36 inches long, let's say, with a heavy knob handle at one end. A hunting crop would be shorter. It would have a leather lash or lariat descending from what could be the whole thing could be leather, but the point is that the upper half of it would be firm, so it's easy to grip and hang on to, and the bottom part would be a flail-like arrangement made of leather tongs generally, and the whole thing wrapped very securely by the sort of firms in England that would make walking sticks and umbrellas, people like the Fox Company and so on, and particularly for very elaborate dressage or for elaborate hunts. These could be adorned with silver bands, and there could well be a little inscription. And in fact, if you wander over to eBay and put in hunting crop, you can see that you could buy one today, friends. Don't waste a moment. From 1895, that has a heavy leaded end on one end, and it was presented in July of 1885 to an individual who's left behind only his or her initials.
I will check that out. And typically, most of these hunting crops, that stick end usually was capped with a crook of a handle, usually in an L shape, made out of horn, antler, etc. Something pretty solid, right? So, this idea of a hunting crop merely to as a handle to hold the whip for the horses. When we're talking about the hunting crop indoors and in city kinds of settings, it's really that horn end that is used as the weapon, not the whip. So in other words, you'd be using it almost like a policeman uses his billy club rather than like Indiana Jones using his whip. And
Well,
go ahead.
That's true. The Penang lawyer, was generally leaded. It was a root, usually a single root. I forget the name of the tree from which it is made, but it was usually a single root and a branch. But the round knob end of it was drilled into, and you could put lead to make it heavier. So it is a defensive or offensive, I suppose, weapon that you could carry around. But consider the contrast here. I mean, what would happen if you were sitting in Baker Street entertaining people and suddenly the door opens and somebody comes in carrying a shovel from the farm, or a rake or some sort of implement
pitchfork.
like that. A pitchfork. Well,
and a torch.
But here, or a torch. But here in Baker Street, in Speckled Band, comes into Baker Street Grimsby Roylott. And his costume, we're told, was a peculiar mixture of the professional and the agricultural. He's very tall. He's wearing a black top hat, a long frock coat, a pair of high gaiters, with a hunting crop swinging in his hand. So here is this guy in civilized London, who looks almost like, as unusual as Dr. Leon Sterndale looked, from fresh from Africa, back in England, but dressed for a completely different climate and very menacing. I mean, somebody walks into a sitting room swinging a heavy hunting crop is, he gets your attention.
You get attention. Well, this is exactly what Holmes did when he reached for his hunting crop and went after James Windibank, who ran from the room.
And I should just point out that gaiters, to save the listeners time for figuring that out, those are sort of like high spats. Spats were a device that you put over your boots because the streets of London at the time were full of horse manure and mud and all sorts of things. So these are sort of high spats that button over the shoe and indeed the lower part of your trouser leg.
Yeah.
So you're protected from mud. So here's Roylott, who looks like he just stepped off the field, or stepped off the race course, or stepped off. My horse is outside panting.
Maybe he rode his horse all the way in. Who knows? From Surrey. And I should know before we go on. I mentioned this crooked handle of the hunting crop. The reason it's that shape is because the whip handle of the hunting crop is used for opening gates. So as you're on a hunt, chasing after the fox, or, perhaps administering to beagles even, as those hunters in their later years have retired from fox hunting and gone into beagling instead, chasing after rabbits or hares. The riding is a little less intensive, but the whole point is you are within some kind of compound or around an estate. And when you're on your horse and you need to pass through a gate, then having this handle allows you to lift that gate from the comfort of the saddle that you're sitting in, rather than dismounting and or requiring people to be on the ground and opening the gates for you. So that's the reason that the handles are shaped as they are. But you mentioned this threatening nature of Grimsby Roylott. Similarly, when Holmes gets to Mapleton in Silver Blaze, and he is looking to engage with Silas Brown, who runs the stables there. He's speaking to a young man and gives him a shilling, or no, a half crown. He was about to give the young man a half crown, and he says he had drawn it from his pocket, and a fierce-looking elderly man strode out from the gate with a hunting crop swinging in his hand. "What's this, Dawson? No gossiping. Get about your business." So there we have
that's great.
Silas Brown, the compound of bully and what did Holmes call him? Never before have I seen the compound of bully. His bullying, overbearing manner was gone. The more perfect compound of the bully, coward, and sneak than Master Silas Brown I have seldom met with.
That's wonderful. Well, and again, we will find the hunting crop popping up in many interesting ways in the world of Sherlock Holmes and outside that world, too. But in the Red-Headed League, Holmes himself arms himself with a hunting crop as he's
Yes.
as he's on the watch there in the basement underneath Jabez Wilson's pawn shop. A hunting crop comes in quite handy.
It did. He actually managed to, he packed it. He said, "Our party's complete," said Holmes, buttoning up his pea jacket and taking his heavy hunting crop from the rack. Later, as they staked out John Clay there, Watson says, "The light flashed upon the barrel of a revolver, but Holmes's hunting crop came down on the man's wrist, and the pistol clinked upon the stone floor. It's no use, John Clay. You have no chance at all." So we saw Holmes use the hunting crop to its fullest effect at that point, that heavy hunting crop. And of course, this heavy hunting crop was also instrumental in the discovery of, a certain jewel that was hiding out.
Yeah, luckily Holmes had this in his sitting room, and there is something more I want to mention about that as we get to the end. But yes, in the case of the 6 Napoleons, we have been led a merry chase through London, the strange mystery of the theft of these busts of Napoleon. They're being broken in odd places. Finally, there's only one left, but Holmes knows clearly what's inside of it. And so how does he extract it? He reaches for his hunting crop.
He does. And in this, as they were heading out to Chiswick, Watson says, "I was not surprised when Holmes suggested that I should take my revolver with me. He had himself picked up the loaded hunting crop, which was his favorite weapon."
And loaded there refers to that lead introduced in the head of it.
I thought, be careful when you're handling a loading hunting crop. You don't want it to go off. No. Right. But this is interesting. For those who are, let's say, less than intimately familiar with the Sherlock Holmes stories, if you said, "What's Sherlock Holmes's favorite weapon?" A loaded hunting crop would not be the first thing that comes to mind. Oh, that's fascinating. And that is exactly what he struck the Napoleonic bust with to such great effect in certainly in the Granada depiction of it.
Well, and also in Frederick Dorsteel's
image
for the case in the Six Napoleons. But it's also, we know the fact is that Holmes is comfortable and equipped, more than comfortable and more than equipped. He has a talent for single stick, as Charlie Blankstein has informed us over the years. And so he's very familiar with and able to defend himself. And also to attack with, a weapon like that. Now, admittedly, a hunting crop, isn't the same thing as a single stick. But as you pointed out, that heavy leaded head of it is, deadly.
It is indeed deadly, and something that is not to be trifled with. Okay, as you probably know, this is the last episode of the month. And as such, what we do is a drawing for all of our supporters on Substack and on Patreon. If you pay for a subscription or a membership on either one of these platforms, you are automatically eligible and entered into this drawing. So, in order to figure out exactly who gets the prize, this back issue of the Baker Street Journal, let's bring out the prize wheel and give it a big spin. It is going around and landing on number 34. Number 34, and that looks like it belongs to, it's David Townsend. Congratulations, David. You are about to be the proud recipient of a back issue of the Baker Street Journal. Just a reminder, if you'd like to participate in this, just go to our show notes and click on the Support Us button or the Patreon button, and we would be delighted to see your name added to this list.
Well, there's just one more thing I wanted to mention about hunting crops.
Yes.
And that is that the hunting crop in the cases of Sherlock Holmes had a very real nature. And that real nature was that when you look at the illustrations of the Sherlock Holmes cases as they appeared in the Strand magazine, you will eventually see certain objects in the Baker Street sitting room repeat themselves in different views. One, of course, is the 8-sided table and so on. And these objects, the small, I forget the name, Moroccan table that with 8 sides, and the basket chair and things like that, repeat because they were the personal property of the illustrator, Sidney Paget. Paget also had a hunting crop. Oh. And so when he drew the hunting crop, he drew the one that he happened to own himself. And that hunting crop wound up in the possession of, I thought I may be wrong about this, but I thought it wound up in the possession of Nick Utekin.
You could have.
Paget's, I think he had Paget's magnifying glass.
He had Doyle's cricket bat.
Well, that he donated, he restored and donated to.
Interesting.
He led the restoration of it. But, it's a wonderful thing to see the appearance of objects like that are so central to the world of Sherlock Holmes and his actions. And we can only presume, of course, that Sidney Paget must have essentially taken it from Sherlock Holmes.
And that truly is just a trifle.